Hello, folks. This is your ticker guy coming at you from somewhere. Probably not where this picture was taken. My photo, by the way. I own the copyright on it, therefore I can use it. And YouTube has nothing to say about that. Yeah, it's perfectly legal for me to use my own copyrighted image, which I took. And I will. And this, by the way, is the background of my screen. Some of you may recognize this sort of capture and display format. It's the one I used to use when I did my ticker video updates. Nice thing about buying software instead of renting it on a subscription basis is that you buy it, you own it, you have it, and hey, guess what? It still works. So I haven't done a video in an awfully long time. There hasn't been much of a point. But I decided to do this based on three things. The triggering event was the executive orders that President Rump signed yesterday. But I wanted to bring up a bunch of coronavirus things, and also I wanted to start with Floyd. So I got three items here on the agenda. You can skip around in here if you're just looking for a discussion of one or both or two of the three instead of the whole thing. Floyd, folks, is something that we really ought to focus and center on. We have a federal and state governments across this country that are deliberately trying to destroy the social fabric and social order of the United States. And the federal government is doing absolutely nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. This is a very serious issue. When the tox report came back on Floyd's death, we knew that he had fentanyl in his system, enough fentanyl to kill a man. In fact, 3 times the normal minimum lethal dose. Okay, LD50s work just like they do in anything else. In other words, there's a certain amount of a substance that will kill about half the people. He had about 3 times that much. Now, the only way that you would get to that point and not already be dead is if you're a frequent abuser of opiates, which he almost certainly was. We know he had a history of drug use, and that you found fentanyl in recent meth use, but not current meth intoxication, is very telling, because the way that opiate overdose kills you is that it suppresses your breathing. And so you essentially choke to death. You suffocate, okay? Because your diaphragm stops working. Your brain is telling your lungs to breathe, and your lungs are ignoring it. And the reason is that fentanyl depresses that signal. So do all other opiates, by the way. That's what makes them dangerous. When you use opiates regularly, and I had a family member that liked all sorts of interesting substances, chemical substances. So I have a little more than a passing familiarity with this sort of stuff. Not through personal experience, through family experience. What ends up happening is that as you use more, as your dependence goes up, it becomes less and less pleasurable and more a pain avoidance mechanism from the withdrawal. And then it gets worse, because when you start having respiratory depression that comes along with it as a result of the dose, that's very uncomfortable. Let's face it, folks, suffocating is not exactly a pleasant way to go. All right? It's one thing if you actually walk into a room that has no oxygen in it, zero, but you are able to exchange gas, you breathe normally, your carbon dioxide level does not go up, but you appear to be breathing normally because the feedback mechanism says that your diaphragm's moving, everything's fine. What just happens is you just pass out. Okay, there's no distress, there's no flailing around, there's no gasping for breath, none of that sort of thing goes on. Okay, you just die. And that actually is a pretty painless way to go. It is one of the more painless ways to go. If you ever manage to get your hands on my K1 rebreather and go through the code, you'll find a Kevorkian option that does exactly that can be activated. And it's essentially, as the name would imply, it gives you a Kevorkian. It gives you a way to commit suicide. And it does so by shutting the oxygen supply off. But everything else works normally. And you just black out. And since you're underwater, you drop the mouthpiece, and that'd be the end of that. But that's not what happens with a fentanyl OD or any other opiate OD. What happens with an opiate OD is that your brain is telling your lungs to inspire air. Your lungs are not cooperating. This is very uncomfortable. So when this stuff starts happening, and the junkie starts talking to other junkies or his dealer, the dealer or the other junkies will suggest, oh, well, we can solve that problem. We'll just add a little meth to the mix. Why? Because methamphetamine is a stimulant, and therefore it stimulates the breathing reflex, and this allows you to consume more of the opiates and not die. In the days when I was younger, I'm sorry I'm not up on current drug lore, but in the days of younger Carl time, this was called a speedball. This was when you watched all the videos and read about all the different forms of drugs you could use and why you shouldn't use any of them because they would all kill you. And yeah, they eventually will, especially these. They called this a speedball. They may still call it a speedball. Maybe they've come up with some other word for it. But essentially, that was the point of the meth, was to prevent you from having a respiratory arrest as a result of ingesting a large amount or shooting up a large amount of opiates. And so you mix it with the meth, and that's the thing. But what they found in Floyd was that he had been a user of meth recently, but he did not have an intoxicating dose of methamphetamine in him at the time he died. Okay, so at that point, we had very good reason to believe that this was essentially an accidental suicide, that he'd killed himself through overdose, and that the police, maybe they exacerbated this, maybe they helped him along a little bit, maybe they helped him along a lot, maybe they killed him. Okay, hey, compressing someone's diaphragm, their chest, so that they can't breathe properly when you've already got some respiratory depression going on is actually it's a pretty effective way to kill somebody. Not intentionally, but it's still manslaughter. But then, there's the body cam footage. And this intrepid news outlet over in the UK managed to get their hands on it outside the United States. It was embargoed. The judge would not allow it to be released in the U.S. Well, they got it, they released it, and now we have some more facts. Specifically, long before Floyd was on the ground with a police officer over him and a knee in his back, he was in the back of a cop car, and he was saying he could not breathe. Nobody was compressing anything. Nobody was restricting in any way his ability to inspire and expire air. And therefore, we now have a fairly decent piece of evidence that, in fact, George Floyd died of an overdose. And the police may not have had anything to do with it at all. Oh, yeah, sure, they still put a knee on his back, but that wasn't the reason he died. He was already in respiratory distress and about to expire. Now, we can ask why they didn't give him naloxone, but, I don't know what the answer to that is, okay, because I don't know if they carry it in Minneapolis or not, but the opiate antidote is out there. I don't know who has it, who doesn't have it, whatever have you, but there's a lot of other questions surrounding this, okay? But the point being, folks, that we have a rage mob that has now raged throughout the United States for how long? All right, months, right? Burning, looting, rioting. And instead of telling them to go suck eggs, we've appeased them. We have hidden the truth from the public, and we attempted to appease them. And what happened out in Portland when we appeased them? We pulled out the federal troops that were guarding, doing a little guard action there in the federal courthouse. Oh, everything's all peaceful. Oh, wait, no, it's not. Now they just tried to burn down a police building with cops in it. And this is why you cannot appease a rage mob ever, 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 folks. I've been talking about that for an awfully long time. In fact, it goes all the way back to when I had rage mobs try to extort me when I ran MCS, and I told them all to go to hell, and the reason is this. If you ever appease a rage mob, you have done two things immediately. Number one, you've pissed off everybody on the other side of whatever the issue is. As a business person, that's stupid. Why would I do that? And you say, well, because the other side won't be pissed off, and if you tell them to go to hell, they will be pissed off. Okay, well, that sounds like maybe there's a calculation to make, except it's based on a false premise, that you can actually appease a rage mob. The truth is you cannot appease a rage mob. The truth is that what happens is as soon as you try to appease a rage mob, the other side of whatever the issue is, it doesn't matter what the issue is, the other side will instantaneously be angry, and then the mob will not be satisfied, ever. And so now you just pissed off everybody. Well, it's better to tell everyone to go to hell. Because while they're not going to be happy, At least we're all talking from, they're dealing from the same side of the deck of cards, if you will. And over time, the people on the other side are going to say, well, he has a principled stand. And the rage mob, they may stay mad and they may not. But you never gave in to extortion, and therefore you never gave in to the ability for them to up the responsibility that they want from you, whatever it is. If you allow somebody to stick you up for $100, he's going to come back the next day and he's going to want $1,000. That's just the way it works. It's the way it's always worked. And it's why you always say no. And it doesn't matter what the cause is. It doesn't even matter if you agree with whatever it is that they're trying to do. Even if you happen to agree with it, you still say no. Well, we don't learn things very well in this country, do we? All right. What are we going to do about this? I don't know. All right, let's talk about coronavirus here. I'm going to show you a bunch of graphs. It's new cases. Now, these are states, okay? This is Tennessee. This is the full range. And take a look here. You have this little spike here, right? Little spike, right? Here's and remember, Memorial Day weekend, right? Right in here. Okay, we got a little acceleration. Then what happens here? It takes off. Does it take off after July 4th? No, because remember, the incubation time is 5 days. When did it take off? It had already started. Because see, here's July 3rd, July 4th. Okay, right? So the acceleration was already happening. So those people who say that this was caused by the July 4th holiday and all the holiday travel, you're full of crap. It was already in process. And what's happening now? We're rolling over. Flattening on hospitalizations, deaths lag. So they're not done here. This probably is. This is getting close. And hey, guess what? People are not going to get tested because they're not feeling sick. This is, and this rollover here, I'm going to show you some other things, okay? Look at what's happening here in Illinois. What's the distinction here in Illinois? Well, Illinois is different than Tennessee, and it's different than a few other things. Let's keep going. We're going to show you a bunch of, like I said, I'm going to show you a bunch of graphs here. Here's Texas. Texas is rolling over. Cases went first. Then what? Then hospitalizations. And now we're seeing like the last gasp here on deaths. And remember, some of these are backdated. Okay, this big spike wasn't actually all this one day. That's BS. All right. But it's a backdated thing. All right. And again, testing is falling off because nobody feels sick. All right. How about Florida? Uh-oh. What happened here? All right. Remember, Florida. Huge. You guys are all going to die. Everyone's going to die. 11,000 cases, 12,000 cases in one day on a average. Wait a minute. Now we're down to 7,600. What? And oh, by the way, we had 15,000 reported. We're what, half that now? Okay. Same thing, roll over here, and we're already starting to see the roll in deaths. And again, testing because nobody feels like shit. Why would you go? How about Arizona? Arizona rolled over hard, big time. In fact, Arizona now has a 7-day moving average that is down to about, well, a little more than a third of where it was at the peak. That is huge, just enormous. How about Georgia? Georgia's starting to roll over. South Carolina has rolled over. Louisiana looks like they're rolling over. And this is an interesting thing here. Now, they've had two peaks, one big one, and another one here. This, remember, was all blamed on Mardi Gras. Well, how about this one? Again, you want to claim July 4th? Nice try, guys. Notice that this trend was well established on a 7-day moving average basis at June 23rd. So how can that be the case? It can't. Okay, duh. New York, remember, they got it early, right? Where are they now? Where's their second wave? Didn't have one, did they? Hospitalizations, deaths, essentially zero, right? Nobody going to the hospital, nobody dying. And then we got Mississippi, which is just starting to roll over as well, just kind of rounding over in the top. Okay, why do I bring up all these states? Well, for a bunch of reasons. If you go back and look at this is all off the COVID Tracking Project's data, folks. They have, unfortunately, what I cannot do is capture these and save them as images because they're dynamically generated. So if you try to do that, it doesn't work. And if you try to take that snippet of code and put it in, you'll find that it's huge because it's actually making real-time calls back to their database. Kind of interesting way of setting up a web page, but because they don't do static images, it makes it kind of a pain in the ass to get it from anywhere else in there. Maybe that's on purpose. They might be doing that because that's what they want to do. Now, these are totals. Now, let's go here and let's look at per 1 million people. Okay, and notice, I want to show you something here. I'm going to turn it on here. And notice that here, the rollover actually comes first before you see the 7-DMA roll. Same thing here. All right, and you can see on deaths, even though on this graph it has not rolled, it has rolled here. We've rolled here, we've rolled here, we've rolled there. Illinois appears to have rolled per 1 million people too, all right, which is kind of interesting. Texas, you turn this on, same thing, okay? But notice where the peak is. It's lower, all right? So what did we get here? What are we learning from all this? Anything at all? Is anybody paying any attention? Oh, gee, I'm so scared with this. Maybe not so much, right? Arizona. Notice how when you do per 1 million, okay, we all of a sudden, these graphs, don't they look really similar? 200, 200, right? 200. Wait a minute. What? Wait, what? How? What are we doing here? Has anyone woke up yet? Have you guys pulled your heads out of your butts? Here's that rate, 823. Here's the 200 rate. Okay, so what we're looking at now is, per 1 million, right? Same rate here. Here's the baseline, and here is our second layer, right? So when we look at the baselines, we're saying, well, where are we compared to the baselines? And you can see, but the shape of the curve, isn't it fascinating? Now look at what we have here. New York went first. Okay? Everybody else is back here. When we start looking at this from a standpoint of where this is, you got people that are early, you got people that are late, but when we take this and we put a scale on it where everyone's looking at the same thing, all right, we see where we are in relationship to everybody else. Now, why is this important? Well, for a bunch of reasons. One of them is that it's showing that this second curve here is very well modeled by everybody that's coming along to play on this. But if you go down into the data and you take the current case counts and you divide by the state populations, you're going to find something fascinating. Every one of these states is rolling over somewhere between 1.7 and 2% of the population having been infected in every case. The only outlier, and it's only by a little bit, is Louisiana. And there's a skew in here too, and it has to do with demographics. Now, exactly why it ties to demographics, I'm not sure. I have several hypotheses. There is a bunch of work that's been done out of ORNL, which is rather interesting. It was reported out. Nobody paid any attention to it in the media either, which is quite astounding, really, when you think about it, because ORNL has a couple of very large supercomputers, and they analyzed a control group and a number of severely ill COVID patients, and they found a 100% correlation match with those people who got severely ill having to do with a regulatory mechanism that ties into how blood pressure works. It's parachemicals that are part of that regulatory system within the human body. This is a piece of profound information because it ties in with what we know about how this virus attacks you through ACE2. And so, and then there's a demographic link here that we're seeing in the data that has to do with the racial makeup of a state. And at a county level, it appears to play out too, which is rather interesting. The skew is not huge. In percentage terms, the percent skew between 1.6 or 1.7% and 2% or 2.2% is on the outside is quite large. But the percentage, it tracks exactly with the percentage skew in demographic makeup of a particular state or region. I haven't been able to falsify that hypothesis yet, and I've been trying now for quite a while. So there are people who have said, oh, you know, the virus is racist. Well, no, but then again, maybe. Not racist per se, but tied to racial factors. This is not an unheard of thing, folks. If you recall, sickle cell is much more prevalent among black Americans or black people in general than is among whites. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Why would black people be more susceptible? Well, as it turns out, it is partially protective against malaria. And where is malaria most common? Okay. So, is this an evolutionary thing? I don't know. But that there is a difference in ACE2 expression is a known change. That there is a difference between obesity, diabetes, and hypertension prevalence among black people and white people is a known fact. That these things seem to correlate with the severity of attack looks appropriate. Now, this is interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One of them is the CDC's estimate is that there are 10 people who are infected for every one who gets clinically sick, who gets sick enough to actually go seek treatment or have anything done. If it is more likely, if you are a person who is black, to get severely ill, that would tend to skew the test percentage higher. It doesn't skew the total number of cases necessary to reach suppression, but it does skew the test percentage. But here's the other thing that goes with this. We knew when Diamond Princess happened, and I've been talking about it since then. And one of the reasons I stopped doing this podcast is nobody paid any attention to it, and all the screamers kept going about how everyone's susceptible. And we know that's bullshit. We knew it was crap in February and March. We knew it was garbage because we had a forced incubation model on Diamond Princess and in other cruise ships. And in a forced incubation model, there is no herd suppression. Everyone who is susceptible gets sick. Just recently, we had an outbreak in a summer camp in Georgia. A bunch of kids. I don't know if your kids have, if you have kids, if they went to overnight camps. Sarah did when she was younger. There was one called Camp of the Pines near Pensacola. She loved it, and it was a nice way for me to get a nice week off. Okay, well, guess what? They rack about 20 kids in a cabin. They're two up bunks, one on top of each other, and then, of course, they're all slammed next to each other. There's basically nothing in the bunkhouse in the cabin except the bunks and a bathroom. Okay, so you got one bathroom, about 20 kids in there, and let me tell you something. If someone goes in there and has something, every last one of those kids is going to get it. You're not going to get to herd suppression and have it stop. Every single susceptible person is going to get it. Why? Because you forcibly incubated the disease between everybody who's there. There is no random, I run into this person, I don't run into that person. That's not the factor, okay? And yet, only about half the kids at the camp got the bug. That's impossible, unless the other half are naturally resistant, which is about where the two papers that were published in Nature, peer-reviewed, one out of Asia, another one, I don't remember where the second one was, but there were two of them that were published that showed T-cell reactivity in people who had never been exposed. In other words, they had natural immunity. We knew this was the case in February and March, folks. And yet we have Birx and Fauci and everybody else and Vanderbilt and IHME and Oxford and all these other models out there saying, oh, no, this is a brand new disease. Nobody has any immunity to it. Everybody's going to get it. And oh, by the way, 2 million people in America are going to die. Well, they didn't, did they? And then they said that we were going to have in Sweden, we were going to have 200,000 dead people in Sweden. Well, hang on a second. Let me see if I can find this here. Oh, wait, this is Tennessee. Coronavirus. Here we go. Here is the Worldometer. All right, here's Worldometer. Let's go down here. 82,000 cases. Okay, 5,700 deaths. All right. Hey, what's happening here? What's happening here? And oh, by the way, where's the deaths? What do we have here? We had 5 on the 7th. How many do we have on the 4th? 1. How many do we have on the 5th? 0. Okay? What do you got here? You basically, nobody's dying of this thing, right? When was the last time we had any kind of real death? Well, back in July. And yet, hey, guess what, guys? It's the 9th of August. Deaths have flatlined. Do we still have some cases? Yeah, we still have some cases. It's not killing anybody. Not making anyone seriously sick. Who gives a crap if people get it? If it doesn't do anything bad to you, why do you care? What are we seeing here? Same thing. Now, next little bit. Okay, this is local area. These are some counties in Tennessee. Davidson County put a mask order in. This is Nashville. Went into effect on the 1st of July. They were already into a nice little move upward. Did it do anything? No. Because we went, how many viral periods? 1st of July, 4 viral periods, 4 full incubation periods, kept going up, leveled off a little bit, and now it starts dropping. Where did it drop? When prevalence reached 1.90%. All of a sudden, now they're on the downside. Where is their 7-day moving average? Under half of where it was at the peak. And guess what? The news is all full of reports of people, by God, we have all this indignity because nobody will follow the mask order. Looks to me like masks didn't do a damn thing. Why is it rolling over? Because you reached suppression. How about Knox County? Knox County put a mask order in place on 7/1 as well. Then on 8/3, they said, oh, we're going to close bars after this peak had already been reached. But guess what? Have they really done? No, probably not. Why? Because their prevalence as of yesterday, when I graphed this, was 1.07%. Too low. But do they have a stair step here? Yep, they do. Are they probably going to float around in this area out for a while? I bet they do. Okay. But, the sawtooth, by the way, this kind of sawtooth pattern, no disease behaves like this. Okay. This is because you are having delays in getting test results back, which makes them worthless to the person who's getting tested. Do not go to test locations and get tested. Why not? Because you can't do anything useful with the information. Get rid of that. A test for which you cannot do anything useful with is, of course, pointless. It also doesn't help the government. How can it? How are they going to contact trace? Stupid. Okay, Blount County, next door. Literally next door. Just south of Knox. Smaller. Quite a bit smaller, actually. A little bit bigger than Sevier. All right. Notice anything interesting? No mask order, ever, at all. In fact, I was over at a bar yesterday, had a couple beers and something to eat. No mask. No, you want to wear one, go right ahead, but there's no order. Okay, guess what? Those look familiar? It looks a lot like, they look real similar, don't they? Mask order, no mask order. Huh. Masks didn't seem to do much, did they? Don't think so. Okay, here's Sevier County, my county. Okay, this is the most inbred and idiotic policy decision I've ever seen. The mayor did this unilaterally. We're going to get to this unilateral executive order garbage here in a minute because that's part of the Trump thing, but it also applies to things like this. Okay? When he put that order in place, we had a falling 7-day case rate. This disease was under control in Sevier County. He goes ahead and puts it in, and what happens? We have a huge spike. It goes to double the previous rate on a 7-day rolling basis. And then where does it roll over? Why? Why? Because we're at 1.87% now. We're at suppression. Did he do this? Oh, no, not at all. And has our mayor rescinded this order, even though he has had proof? No. In fact, he extended it just a few days ago to the end of the month. Why? Because the governor of Tennessee gave him unilateral plenary authority to do it, even though that order from the governor is facially void. Let's talk about that, because I think it's about time to go there, but I want to bring one other thing up first, okay, which is here. Everyone wants to talk about masks. This is very important. This is from a Canadian lawyer magazine. Note the date, 13 September 2018. The Ontario Nurses Association sued because a major hospital group in Toronto, in fact, a bunch of them, had a policy you had to either be vaccinated or wear a mask if you were a nurse. The policy was struck down at St. Michael's Hospital and several other hospitals from Toronto Academic Health Science Network. By the way, this was the second bite at the apple these guys took. In other words, these nurses had gone to court once and had won. And these institutions refused to honor that. And so they filed a second action. They struck it down, saying that the policy does not protect patients and doesn't serve to prevent the transmission of the flu in hospitals. Now remember, folks, what we're talking about here is surgical masks, okay? And we're talking about source control, the exact thing that people are talking about with mask orders when it comes to coronavirus. The reality of the situation is this. Okay? The ONA understood. Now read this. I think the orthodoxy on this at the beginning was that these policies to protect patients, and I really feel that ONA understood the notion a healthy, unvaccinated nurse needs to wear a mask when she doesn't have any symptoms, was not a credible means to achieve what was a laudable objective. ONA really went to bat on something proven correct. Proven correct. That was before this all became political, folks. This was when we were looking at science. We have 14 random controlled trials that say that masks do not work. We put the policies in place anyway, and now we have experimental evidence from Sevier County, from Knox County, from Blount County, and from all over the rest of the country in various states that say that, once again, masks do nothing. So I'm going to leave this chart up while I talk about this last thing, which is what prompted me to do this recording in the first place, and that is Trump and these executive orders. Folks, in the first 30 days of this viral outbreak, there was a legitimate argument for the exercise of executive authority, because executive authority without the act of the legislature, and folks, legislatures come in many sizes, okay? Your city council is a legislature. Your county commissioners are a legislature. The states have a bicameral legislature, the House and Senate. And then, of course, the federal government has a bicameral legislature as well. The Constitution says that the federal government shall guarantee to each of the states a Republican form of government. A Republican form of government is exactly that. It is a form of government where you elect legislators. Those legislators propose bills, ordinances, or laws. They get debated. There is public debate taken in many cases, but that debate happens in public. Legislators get up, they make speeches. There's advice and consent. Maybe they bring in experts. Maybe they take public testimony. Maybe they don't. That's at their discretion. They don't have to do it, but they can. And then they take a vote. And that vote is recorded. And we all know what the vote is because it's reported out. And then that bill goes to the executive, and the executive says yes or no. And if the executive says yes, then it becomes a law and ordinance. If the executive says no, well, then they get to go back and try to override it. And the exact way in which this takes place is different from place to place to some degree, but that's the procedure. The reason you have the ability to enforce executive actions and take executive orders is because sometimes you don't have time. The obvious one is the early warning system goes off. There's a nuclear missile headed for New York. You have 15 minutes to make up your mind what you're going to do about it. You do not have time to call the legislature into session, or if it's there, to take up a bill and debate. Well, do we shoot it down? Do we nuke the person who is nuking us? Or do we just sit there and take the strike and absorb the casualties, of which there will be many? No. You don't have time to do that. And so the executive has the power under exigent circumstance to act now, because there are times when that's necessary. Same sort of situation arises when it comes to the police. If you pull a gun on a police officer, he doesn't have time to go to a judge to get a warrant to arrest you. He gets to shoot you right now because you just pulled a gun on him. You didn't give him. But if he wants to search your house because he thinks you might be cooking meth in there, he has to go get a warrant. Why? Because there is no exigent circumstance. Now, if there happens to be some reason for him to kick the door down because you're about to blow up the building and blow up the neighborhood, well, maybe you'll get away with it. But even so, okay? All right. So for the first few days of this thing, the first month maybe, 30 days, there was an exigent circumstance argument for these actions. Mask orders, lockdowns, 15 days to slow the spread, that sort of stuff, okay? But beyond that point, no. Because there was no exigent circumstance. Every legislative body has the right to refuse to act. That's part of a Republican form of government. That you want the government to act. You, some pressure groups, I don't care if you're screaming Karen on either side of this mask debate. I don't care if you're screaming Karen on either side of coronavirus. I don't care if you're screaming Karen on either side of the situation with regards to unemployment and foreclosures and everything else. I don't care which reason makes you in anger. Doesn't make any difference. Okay? It's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that in a Republican form of government, the legislature is elected by the people by apportionment, and that legislature has the duty in order to make decisions as to what to debate and what to send up to the executive for signature or not. And if the legislature cannot concur, then it doesn't vote out a bill or an ordinance. And that's the end of the discussion. The legislature in the current case in Sevier County has not convened. In Knox County and in Davidson County, an unelected health board made these decisions. Now, could the city council at that particular point intervene and say, oh, bite me, and potentially strip them of that order? Well, I don't know. But look, when this first happened, was there an argument in March for emergency orders? Yes, there absolutely was. At a county level, at a state level, at a city level, and at a federal level. That is a fairly sound argument. It makes sense. It has a sound foundation in the Constitution, and it has a sound foundation in common sense. But what Donald Trump did yesterday does not. What Mayor Waters did in Sevier County does not. What Governor Lee, Governor DeSantis, Governor Whitlis, Governor Cuomo, what all they have done over these last 6 months does not. There is nothing prohibiting the legislature of the state of Tennessee from convening and passing ordinances and laws. Nothing. There is nothing prohibiting the state of Wisconsin from doing so, the state of Michigan, the state of Florida, the state of New York, the state of New Jersey. The federal government, the United States Congress. In fact, the United States Congress has passed several bills related to coronavirus. There's nothing prohibiting any of these legislative bodies from doing that. There's nothing prohibiting the Sevier County commissioners from coming into session and voting. Well, some states have part-time legislatures, but nothing prohibits the governor from recalling the legislature for a special session. In fact, that is allowable and part of the process in every single state of the union, and yet it has not been done. What Donald Trump did was take an executive action that he doesn't have the authority to take. Folks, when does this so-called emergency end? Okay? When does the legislature do its job? And the answer is the legislature is in session, is available to do its job. It's not dead. We didn't get nuked. The legislature of the United States did not get blown to bits. The legislature of the state of Tennessee did not get blown to bits. They're not all dead. The legislature of Sevier County did not get blown to bits. The legislature of Knoxville, the city, did not get blown to bits. Or the state of Florida. All those bodies exist. All those bodies are functional. There's nothing wrong with them. They're not gone. They weren't destroyed by an enemy missile. They're just declining to act, which is their right. And the fact that they decline to act is legislation. It is legislative discretion. It is perfectly within their jurisdiction to do that. And it is not within the jurisdiction of an executive to make law. That's not how it works. These actions, folks, are casus belli. They are reason standing alone to void the government. They are a direct violation of the Constitution. You don't think so? Well, why don't we take a look at see what it says? Here it is from Cornell's Law School. They're fantastic, by the way, and that puts not just the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and everything, but the statutes in a very easily searched format. Here we are, folks. Section 4, Article 4, the United States Constitution. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and an application of the legislature or the executive against domestic violence when the legislature cannot be convened. Except the legislature can be convened, but it has not been. And a republican form of government, right here, folks, right here. The United States federal government has an obligation to step in and stop these executive orders at the state level. But you see, Donald J. Trump loves them because he's using them now. He couldn't get agreement out of the legislature on what he wanted, so he just went ahead and did it anyway. But the legislature has every right to refuse to act. You know, I called out Barack Obama for doing the same thing with DACA. It was an absolutely unconstitutional act. Why did he take it? Because the legislature refused to act. The legislature has the right to refuse, folks. The legislature of Sevier County has refused to act. It has declined. It's not incapable. The legislature, the county commission, in fact, met just a few days before the mayor imposed his order. They could have taken up an ordinance. They didn't. The state of Tennessee, the legislature of Tennessee, could have taken up an ordinance and made it a law. They didn't. The state of Florida could have done the same. They didn't. All these other governors that have done these things, at this point, the legislature could have taken these things up, debated, and passed it. They haven't. And now Donald J. Trump, because by God, MAGA, if oh boy, we got to do something about this unemployment problem. So what he did was he actually went even worse. He went even further. Not only did he move money around as he saw fit, which was appropriated for a different purpose, which, by the way, he cannot do. Okay? You can't make an argument that this is national defense. This is not, the wall. I don't know about that one. Okay, the repurposing there. That one's at least got an arguable connection to national defense, which, if he took defense funds, yeah, no. This is even better. Not only did the president turn around and say that he's going to spend this money, he did something worse. He has apparently, by the language of this order, it appears that he has obligated the states to spend money, which the executive has absolutely no authorization to do. In fact, Congress can't even do that. This has been litigated dozens of times. It is the reason that the Obamacare Medicaid expansion was turned into an opt-out for those states that didn't want it, because it obligated the states to spend money. And even the legislature, even the Congress, through a law, cannot do that. Now, what they can do is bribe the states, which they repeatedly do. But there's a difference between an obligation and a bribe. Politically, the legislature of the United States can bribe the states into doing things, which is why Medicaid exists in the first place, because it's a bribe. We'll give you some of the money, you pay for the rest. But the state has the right to say no. This EO appears not to have that. Folks, you either stand on your principles and on the Constitution of the United States, or you stand for nothing. If you are willing to cede to Donald Trump and to your governor and to your mayor the right to do things that are not constitutional, the ability to do things that are not constitutional, you have taken what was a constitutional republic and you've turned it into a monarchy. Why would we honor votes? Why would votes matter in that situation? Why, a vote is simply a expression of legislative authority, right? By the people to elect representatives. Well, wait a minute. I elected a bunch of representatives. Now, I happened to elect them the last time in the state of Florida because I haven't had the opportunity to elect them here in the state of Tennessee yet. But I elected a bunch of representatives in the state of Florida, and then Governor DeSantis, when the legislature had declined to act over a period of months, Governor DeSantis just did whatever the hell he wanted. Well, wait a minute. I didn't just get to vote for the governor. I got to vote for a bunch of other people that represent me in the state as well. Republican form of government, folks, has a very specific meaning. This cannot be allowed to stand. If you think this ever ends, it will not. We have everybody running around and screaming crazies thinking that this thing's SARS. We have polls out that say that the American public thinks that this virus has killed 30 million people in America. No, it hasn't. In my county, it has killed 7. This county normally sees about 800 people die every year. In other words, less than 1% of all of the deaths are from COVID. Less than 1%. And we are seeing rollovers in every single state when we get to approximately 2% of the population that's had a diagnosed case. You find me the exception. You can't. They're all there. Go look at Sweden. They locked down nothing. Where did it roll over for them? Less than that, by quite a bit. Did we actually increase the rate of penetration by forcing the virus into people? Did we violate herd suppression intentionally by concentrating it into populations that could be infected? It sure looks like it. That's what the statistics tell us. How about Singapore? Singapore has a 0.06% case fatality rate. 0.06. That's less than the flu. Why? Because within the first couple of weeks, they figured out what was going on. having dealt with SARS, which really was very deadly, killed about 15% of the people got it, they shut down, forcing the transmission of the virus into vulnerable people through their healthcare system. And what they ended up with, I mean, they didn't know. They thought it was SARS. They locked down the country hard. But they didn't stop the infections. They still had 40,000 people, some odd. It's still going up. They're still getting cases. Okay, they can't prevent it by locking down society any more than we can. But statistically speaking, it killed nobody. 27 people died so far out of the entire country. Almost no one. In counties like mine, where we did not force it into vulnerable populations like nursing homes, we have seven deaths. Less than 1% of all deaths expected in our county in a year, and a 0.4% case fatality rate among diagnosed cases, which means if it's 10 to 1, it's 0.04. That's less than the flu. New York, on the other hand, not so much. But what did New York do? New York forced it into nursing homes, and they forced it through the healthcare system into vulnerable people, and it killed a bunch of them. Are you telling me that the difference between Sevier County and New York City is demographics? I don't think so. It's government policy. That's homicide. That's factually what it is. Why don't we call things what they are? Can you make an excuse that in the first month we didn't know what we were doing? Okay, I'll go for that. Beyond that, does that hold water? No, it does not. Not at all. So, folks, you figure out what you want to do with all this, okay? Gone almost an hour now, and that's enough time. I don't know when you'll see me on YouTube again. I don't know if you'll see me with tickers again. But these three things, all three of them, we can't deal with any of these, okay? Especially the constitutional violation of the Republican form of government. America's gone. It's not in trouble. It's gone. And I don't care if you like Trump or not. I don't care if you voted for him. I don't care if you didn't vote for him. I don't care if you think he's the Antichrist. I don't care if you liked Obama or not. It doesn't make any difference. The Constitution is not the 10 suggestions. And if you're only going to make a stink about it when your guy isn't the one that's in office, then we have nothing at all other than a monarchy. And we may as well quit pretending, because that's what it is. And if you think that you're actually going to make a decision, given what you got out there, for who are you trying to kid? I mean, ticker guy. And that's how it is.